They say betrayal rarely comes with a warning. For me, it came with champagne and shrimp cocktails. I was standing at the founder's retirement party, holding a sweating glass, watching smiles that didn't reach anyone's eyes, when I realized something had shifted. The company I'd poured 10 years into had started to rot, not loudly, but quietly, like termites in the walls. One missed invite here, one last-minute reschedule there, but that night, it hit like a gut punch wrapped in designer napkins. The new CEO, Lucas Halbrook, was the founder's nephew, a man with too much confidence and not nearly enough competence. He worked the room like he owned it, tossing out words like synergy and generational pivot while wearing a blazer that looked like it was about to burst at the seams. But all I heard was, "We're gutting this place, and anyone who costs too much goes first." I'm Stella Hart. I wasn't just a VP, I was the engine. I was the one who closed the Westman Global deal, the account that turned our logistics firm from a regional courier into a national powerhouse. That deal was my baby. I pitched it during a snowstorm with no phone signal, half a deck, and frozen toes. I rescued that account on Christmas Eve from a distribution disaster over Zoom. I knew their team better than some members of my family, and yet I hadn't been on a single call with them in weeks. Something didn't add up. It wasn't paranoia, it was pattern recognition. Meeting invites vanished from my calendar. Clients were told I was unavailable. Junior staff I had mentored for years were reassigned without explanation. One even apologized in the hallway, said it wasn't his idea. Lucas had called it strategic realignment. I called it what it was: erasure. Quiet, calculated erasure. So I stopped reacting. I listened. I documented. I created backups. I logged every calendar change, every memo where my name was accidentally left out. I played the part, smiled in meetings, nodded at buzzwords, made small talk about vision and velocity. But I was building a file. The moment of clarity came in an email, simple, polite, from Westman's assistant. "Hey Stella, just checking. Grant asked if you were joining today's call." I hadn't been invited. It wasn't a mix-up. It was a red flag. That night, I stopped pretending. I reached out to Westman's COO for a casual lunch. Nothing on the record, just a friendly chat. But halfway through our meal, he asked me, "If you had full control, what would you change?" I looked him in the eye and said, "I wouldn't change things. I'd rebuild them, leaner, smarter, no ego, just execution." He smiled, didn't say anything more. He didn't have to. 2 days later, I got the gold-trimmed invitation to the executive retreat. First one ever. A decade of saving this company, and now they wanted me there? Please. That wasn't an honor. That was bait. Lucas's signature was at the bottom, smug and rehearsed. He was planning something. I didn't RSVP. I packed a war chest. Contracts, memos, data, backup files. I even checked the Westman Agreement, Clause 7.4.3, removal of key liaison without consent voids the deal. Lucas thought he was setting a trap. What he didn't know was, I had stopped playing defense. I wasn't walking into a retreat. I was walking into a battlefield, and I already knew where the landmines were. Fairway Pines looked exactly like the kind of place where men like Lucas felt invincible. White columns, manicured greens, and bourbon flowing like strategy slides in a Monday morning meeting. I arrived early, calm but alert, the war chest in my bag and steel in my spine. Lucas greeted me with the smug confidence of someone who thought he still controlled the script. "Stella, glad you could squeeze us in," he said, flashing that politician smile. I matched it with one I'd perfected over years of boardrooms and buried knives. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," I replied, voice steady, gaze colder than the espresso being passed around. The entire retreat felt like theater. Lucas played the lead, but the audience was smarter than he realized. During the welcome mixer, he gave a speech full of shiny nonsense about innovation and fresh leadership. then casually gestured toward me, calling my work legacy. The message was clear. My time was over, and his era had begun. What he didn't know was that someone else had already asked me a different question. Not about the past, but about what I'd build next. As the night unfolded, I moved like smoke through the event, silent, observant, collecting glances, whispers, details. At dinner, he introduced Marcus, one of my former mentees, as the future of operations. Marcus looked mortified. I smiled and said nothing, letting the awkward tension speak for itself. Later, by the fire pit, Amelia from Westmond brushed by me like it was nothing, but her words sliced clean. Grant asked for you specifically. He had the pairings reshuffled. My stomach didn't sink. It rose. Grant Ryland never shuffled anything without a reason. This wasn't sentiment. It was signal. The next morning, I dressed like a strategist, not a guest. Buttoned shirt, precision shoes, and a pocket of clauses that could implode a contract with a signature. On the course, Lucas performed. Every swing came with a buzzword. Every hole, a sales pitch. I stayed quiet, answered Grant's questions with surgical precision. Let Lucas talk himself into corners. When Grant asked how I'd navigate a multi-state rollout under new regulations, I didn't blink. I laid out region-specific routing plans, departmental metrics, and visibility strategies like I was sketching blueprints in real time. Lucas tried to interrupt, but Grant cut him off with a glance. By the 15th hole, Lucas was pacing. By the 17th, he was desperate. He pulled me aside while Grant took a call, leaned in with fake concern, and said, "Just so you know, this round won't change anything. Your replacement's already lined up." I gave him a smile so calm it bordered on pity. "I'm not here to save anything. I'm just finishing the round." He blinked, thrown off by my stillness, and for the first time, I saw it. Fear. Not of me, but of what he didn't understand. Lucas had no idea he'd already lost. On the 18th hole, with the sun high and the green so perfect it looked fake, he made his move. Loudly, performatively, he announced to everyone that I was being let go as part of a leaner direction. "She's just too expensive," he said with a laugh, expecting a few polite chuckles. What he got was silence. Then Grant stepped forward, extended his hand to me, and said, "Thank you, Stella. We'll take it from here." He turned to Lucas and added, "My company will pay her salary. The deal is with her, not you." Then came the contract. Clause 7.4.3 highlighted in Grant's steady fingers, severing our old firm's hold on Westmond in one stroke. Lucas stood frozen, phone buzzing like a hive, face pale. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. I'd already played my shot. All that was left was to walk off the green while his empire cracked under the weight of its own arrogance. I didn't look back as I left the green. There was no need to watch Lucas unravel. The final move had already been made, clean and irreversible. Grant's words echoed in my mind, not as a celebration, but as confirmation. The deal is with her, not you. By the time I reached my car, my phone was already buzzing, not with condolences, but with alignment. First came the internal thread from Westmond, simple and precise. Stella Hart, Executive Vice President of Strategy, effective immediately. No mention of my former employer, no drama, just a surgical transfer of power. Then a message from Tasha, my old assistant. 3 people just walked out of Lucas's 11:30. They said they want in. Should I tell them to pack? I stared at the screen for a beat before typing back. Only the ones who know how to build. I drove with the windows down, wind curling through my hair, heart steady. I wasn't escaping anything. I was arriving. That night, I poured a glass of wine, stepped out onto the patio of my apartment, and sat in the quiet. The city below shimmered, unaware of how many invisible threads had just been cut and rewoven. I didn't respond to the LinkedIn posts or the congratulatory emails that began to flood in. The ones from people who once ignored my questions now suddenly remembered my name. I let them sit. There would be time to answer later, or not. Control meant I chose when to speak. A week later, the news broke. Lucas Halbrook had been repositioned by the board, the corporate equivalent of being shelved without ceremony. The press dressed it up in polite language. Strategic realignment, new leadership era, investor recalibration. But everyone who mattered knew what it meant. He was out. Not gone, but irrelevant. At a press event he wasn't supposed to attend, he tried to spin it, called it contractual trickery, claimed he'd been ambushed by outdated provisions. But the investors weren't buying it. Westmund hadn't returned a single call, and without that account, the company was bleeding from the inside. I didn't watch the press conference. I had a full day. 3 meetings with Fortune 100 companies, a pitch from a European logistics firm, and a private session with a green tech startup looking to rebuild supply chains from scratch. None of them had ever heard of Lucas. Every one of them had requested me by name. My new office was everything my old one wasn't. No heavy walnut furniture, no status chandelier, just clean light, open space, and a wall of glass facing the city I now shaped. On my desk sat one photo, a candid shot from the 18th hole. My arm slung casually over Amelia's shoulder, Lucas blurred in the background mid-blink. On the bottom, in Grant's handwriting, "You didn't play to win. You built the course." I looked at it in the quiet between meetings, not nostalgic, just grounded. That snapshot wasn't a trophy. It was a marker, a reminder that I hadn't clawed my way back. I had designed the terrain. The company I gave a decade to had collapsed under its own ego, but I hadn't been buried in the rubble. I was already pouring the foundation somewhere else, and this time I held the blueprints, the budget, and the keys. The thing about building something new is that it doesn't start with noise. It starts in silence. Not the kind that follows applause, but the kind that hums when the lights are low. The team is small, and every decision matters. That's where I lived for the next 2 months. In the space between headlines and handshakes, sketching systems, assembling people, and laying out the bones of a company that wasn't just reaction, but intention. I didn't chase speed. I chased precision. Westmund gave me full strategic control, no board filters, no legacy protocols. My first move wasn't flashy. I dismantled the old playbook. I wasn't interested in recycled models padded with buzzwords and slide decks full of fluff. I brought in lean teams who knew what failure looked like and weren't afraid to get dirt under their nails. I called back 3 of my old junior associates, the ones Lucas had reassigned without warning. 2 said yes before I even finished the pitch. The 3rd showed up at my office the next morning, resume in hand, eyes clear. "I just want to work somewhere that means something again." That became the baseline. Not ego, not titles, but meaning. Our office was nothing like the marble and mahogany fortress I'd left behind. No corner offices, no glass walls separating leadership from builders. Just shared tables, whiteboards cluttered with ideas, and voices that actually listened. I led the first all hands myself. No slides, just a room, a marker, and a challenge. We're not here to repeat. We're here to rebuild better, smarter. And if you're only here for the job title, you're already in the wrong room. That set the tone. By week 4, we'd restructured Westmund's entire Northeast freight corridor with a 12% efficiency gain. By week 6, we'd landed a consulting deal with a top-tier automotive firm looking to rebuild its supply chain post-merger. Lucas's name came up once. Someone asked if we needed to be careful about competitive leaks. I didn't even look up. You don't protect against ghosts, you move through them. And we did. While my former company floundered under press leaks and investor panic, we moved quiet and fast. Every win we logged came from groundwork, not grandstanding. When Forbes ran their logistics innovation feature, they didn't call me a disruptor. They called me an architect. I preferred that. Disruptors burn things down. Architects know where to put the beams. My phone buzzed constantly now. Not from recruiters or analysts, but from other women who'd watched from the sidelines. Some were still in boardrooms like the one I'd walked out of. Others were fighting to be heard in startups that confused culture with ping-pong tables. They asked how I'd done it. I told them the truth. I didn't wait for permission. I built while they doubted. I created while they erased. And when the door closed, I didn't knock. I rewrote the floor plan. That kind of freedom doesn't come with a title. It comes with scars, with quiet planning, and with knowing your worth, even when someone else tries to edit you out. So no, I wasn't angry anymore. I was busy. Too busy building something that couldn't be stripped with a memo or undone with a board vote. I had become the kind of leader I used to search for in every room and never found, until I stopped looking and became her myself. Success, real success, doesn't announce itself with a banner or a press release. It moves like water, reshaping everything in its path while the world still thinks it's standing still. By the third month, we weren't just a new name in logistics. We were the name whispered in corner offices, mentioned in investor decks, circled in red on competitor whiteboards. But I didn't measure progress by headlines. I measured it in details. How fast a solution reached the floor. How confident a junior associate felt speaking in front of clients. How many nights I left the office knowing the work meant something. That was the difference now. My calendar wasn't filled with politics. It was filled with purpose. One morning, I walked into the office to find a note taped to my desk. No name, just 5 words written in neat black ink. You made this room safe. I didn't need to know who wrote it. I already knew. It was in the way people spoke now, not watching their backs, but leaning into conversations, into ideas. Meanwhile, the silence from my old company was getting louder. Reports trickled in through mutual contacts, high turnover, missed projections, board uncertainty. I didn't celebrate it. There was nothing joyful about watching something you helped build crumble, even if you'd already walked away from the wreckage. But there was something clarifying about knowing you'd made the right call, that you didn't run, you rebuilt. The most surreal moment came one afternoon when I got a call from a former board member, someone who'd once backed Lucas without question. He didn't apologize. Men like him rarely do. But his voice was lower, more deliberate. He asked if I'd consider consulting on a restructuring plan. I listened, silent, pen resting on my desk. When he finished, I said simply, "Send the terms. I'll see if it's worth my time." Because that's the thing they never expect. Not just that you'll survive, but that you'll thrive so completely they'll come knocking without realizing they're not in charge anymore. My favorite part of all this wasn't the power. It was the clarity. The deep knowing that I didn't need a title to matter, didn't need a spotlight to lead. I just needed the freedom to make the right decisions with the right people. And I had that now. My days were full, my team sharp, and the vision clear. I ended every week the same way. Lights low, notebook open, not reflecting on what we'd done, but mapping where we'd go next. Because building wasn't a phase, it was a mindset, and I wasn't done, not even close. I wasn't chasing legacy. I was designing systems that wouldn't need a name attached to endure. Systems that would outlive every ego that tried to control them. And that, more than anything, is what I wished someone had told me earlier. that the real win isn't proving them wrong. It's proving yourself right so thoroughly that you no longer remember who doubted you in the first place. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of day that starts quiet but hums with possibility beneath the surface, when my assistant stepped in holding a cream envelope with a gold seal. No sender, no stamp. Just my name written in confident, looping script, Stella Hart. And for a moment, I thought it might be some kind of industry invite or an award I hadn't applied for. But when I opened it, it was an invitation to speak, not just at any event, but the Global Supply and Innovation Forum in Berlin. The same stage where 10 years ago I'd sat in the audience watching industry titans talk about transformation, while I scribbled notes in the margins of a cheap notebook. And now they were asking me to open the conference, keynote slot, full access, first billing. And the irony wasn't lost on me, because the theme this year was redefining foundations. And if there was anything I knew in my bones, it was how to build from beneath the rubble. Not just rebuild, but reshape, realign, reimagine what leadership could be without the noise, without the hierarchy, just vision sharpened by scars, and the will to never ask permission again. And as I stood there, holding that card, I thought back to all the rooms I'd been underestimated in, all the meetings where my ideas had been nodded at but never followed, all the subtle exclusions dressed as oversights, the way Lucas had smiled when he said I was too expensive, and how quiet that smile had become when Grant handed him the contract. And I realized this moment wasn't about revenge or recognition. It was about proof, not to them, to me, that I had never needed the stage to hold power. But now that I had it, I would use it like a scalpel, not a spotlight. So I said yes. Flew out with one carry-on and a presentation I wrote on the plane at 3 a.m. Between espresso shots and turbulence, and when I stepped onto that stage, it wasn't in a designer suit or with a rehearsed smile. It was in tailored clarity, with my sleeves rolled up and my voice steady, and I told them the truth. That resilience wasn't about enduring. It was about adapting without asking who gets left behind. That leadership was no longer a title granted, but a trust earned in the dark moments when no one is watching. That innovation didn't start in R&D labs, but in conversations where every voice mattered and every challenge was seen as a map, not a wall. And when I finished, the applause didn't come all at once. It built like momentum, like understanding clicking into place. And afterward, a woman no older than 24 came up to me with wide eyes and whispered, "I didn't know we were allowed to lead like that." And I smiled, because that was it. That was the shift. Not just that I had made it, but that someone else could now see the path too. And when I returned home, jet-lagged and full of fire, I didn't go straight to the office. I took a walk through the neighborhood where it all started, past the cafe where I used to draft strategy decks between shifts, past the co-working space where I'd begged for client meetings over weak coffee and unreliable Wi-Fi. And I stood there, still in heels, watching the light flicker in a window I used to press my dreams against. And I didn't feel pride or nostalgia. I felt ready, because this, all of it, wasn't a pinnacle. It was a foundation, and I had more to build. The real shift came not with applause or headlines, but in the silence after, when the world had moved on to its next buzzword and I was back at my desk, sleeves rolled, eyes sharp, surrounded not by fanfare, but by blueprints, calendars, and problems no one else wanted to solve. Because that's what leadership really is. Not the photo ops, not the stage lights, but the steady commitment to clarity when things get murky, the refusal to blink when the numbers slip, or the client pivots, or the plan cracks under weight. And that week, I got a message from Malcolm Tate, Westman's COO, short and clear. Just 4 words. "We're scaling phase 2. Which meant everything we'd built so far wasn't the peak, just the ramp, and that the work ahead would require more speed, more vision, more people who understood that excellence didn't come from hierarchy, but from cohesion. And I knew exactly what to do. I called an offsite, Rented a modest space in the mountains, not flashy, just quiet and high enough above the noise that we could hear ourselves think. And I brought the team, not the top titles, but the ones who moved the needle daily, the ones who asked questions no one else thought to ask. And I opened that weekend with a story, not mine, not entirely, but one they knew in pieces, and I filled in the blanks. Not to inspire, but to align, because when people understand what they're part of, they invest more than just hours. They invest belief, and that belief became our engine, powering every pivot, every late night, every hard decision made without flinching. And I watched it happen in real time. The culture we'd fought to shape now shaping us back. Tighter, smarter, faster, but never brittle, always fluid. And somewhere in that momentum came another unexpected knock. This time, from a tech firm on the verge of a supply chain overhaul, asking if we could advise, then lead, then partner. And suddenly, we weren't just rebuilding our own infrastructure. We were blueprinting systems for industries we hadn't touched before. Healthcare, renewables, even education logistics. Because the truth is, once you prove you can architect trust under pressure, people hand you bigger maps. And I didn't flinch. I redrew every one of them, but I never stopped looking inward. Never stopped asking if we were building fast or building right. And one night, long after the office had emptied and the city was just a hum below the glass, I walked through each department alone, lights low, monitors asleep, and I stopped by every desk, remembering where each person had started, who they'd been before this place gave them something steadier to stand on. And I realized that the real victory wasn't that I'd built something powerful, it was that I'd built something that outlived me, that functioned without needing my name at the top. Something rooted enough to grow without my constant watering. And as I stood there, code in hand, I thought back to that first slow walk across the 18th hole, the weight in my chest, the precision in my step. And I knew now that was never the end of the story. It was just the moment I stopped asking who would let me lead and started deciding how I would. Not just for me, but for everyone watching, learning, stepping up. Because legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what keeps moving forward without you. The story of Stella isn't just about revenge or reclaiming power. It's about clarity, resilience, and the quiet strength of knowing your worth even when others try to erase it. Her journey reminds us that titles don't define leadership, and recognition doesn't always arrive with applause. Sometimes, the most powerful moves happen in silence, in late-night planning, in staying calm under pressure, in choosing to build instead of break. Stella's rise wasn't about proving others wrong, but about proving herself right again and again, with strategy, with patience, and with a fierce commitment to doing the work. The lesson here is simple but profound. When systems try to shut you out, don't shrink. Rebuild. Don't wait for the gate to open. Draw your own map. Real value can't be erased, and quiet excellence will always outlast loud arrogance. So, to anyone listening who's ever felt underestimated, overlooked, or pushed aside, let this be your reminder that you don't need permission to lead. You need vision, integrity, and the courage to take the next step, even when the path isn't lit. Keep building, one move at a time.